Jim, this question was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jeff in upstate New York. I am currently watching Roddy Piper's Georgia run for the first time, and it's been really fun to see him banter with Gordon Solie. As a kid who grew up in New York, I loved his early WWF run, but felt his post-WrestleMania 3 work to be spotty at best. I was hoping that you could offer critiques on Piper's run in LA, Portland, Georgia, and Crockett,
Jesus,
as well as his time in WWF. Which run or runs did you favor and why?
Well, good God, this is an essay question. We could be here for a while. I didn't see really the Los Angeles run. I don't know that too much of that even exists on video, does it?
There is a good amount on video, not the greatest quality, but there is a bunch of stuff with him and Chavo off Spanish TV, yes.
Well, in the Spanish language TV, which would have been, what, 79-ish or thereabouts?
76, 77, 78.
Okay.
79.
And then he went to Portland. I've got more of the Portland stuff. I have the Buddy Rose collection. Portland, and everybody was nostalgic for Portland, and it did have its own appeal, Portland wrestling, and it was different than a lot of the other programs. And the fact that they were able to keep that small crew and that small territory fresh and exciting with, they use the same amount of guys on their TV that WWE Raw does now. Of course, their show wasn't 3 hours long, but it was a whole lot more interesting because the guys were motivated, because every week they came up with their shit. And Don Owens had a booker, but the guys had a lot of freedom there, and he had a lot of smart guys that knew what to fucking do. And they came up with a lot of shit that kept that thing exciting and intriguing and kept people coming back. I loved the Georgia stuff that the questioner is talking about, because that was what, 82, and VCRs, TBS was starting to get, on more cable systems, or more cable systems were starting to pop up. I didn't have to go over to Weasel Dooley's 30 miles away and watch Georgia wrestling, because they had cable in Nashville, and I was starting to get friends down there to tape a few things for me. But that was the dream come true, because Piper was going to work with Lawler, and Piper is a babyface and Lawler is a heel. And at the time, we hadn't seen Lawler heel in like 3 years at that point, because he had switched back as a babyface after he'd come back from the broken leg. And we're all set for it, and the promos are leading up to it, and it's great. And then suddenly, and there goes Piper. So that was a great little spot there. And he established the role of the color commentator in wrestling with that run. Everybody, I know a lot of people credit Vince and Jesse Ventura, but no, everybody who saw it remembers, okay, this is a brand new thing, a wrestler as a color commentator, and it's Roddy Piper. And anybody who saw that at that point never saw another color commentator ex-wrestler without thinking of Piper. Would you say that's fair? He created that.
Piper created it, although he wasn't what we would think of as the traditional heel commentator. Everyone kind of became a version of Jesse, although not as strong as Jesse. Piper was conversational.
Yeah.
Piper was having a conversation, and he was always respectful of Gordon Solie. There was never any combativeness between the two of them, even though Piper was friends with the heels, sided with the heels, sometimes helped the heels. Him and Gordon got along.
And that was, because he was doing that job as an announcer would, as a former football player, who was asked to go on ABC Monday Night Football. He's being himself. He's playing it straight. But anyway, I like Piper in that position. But my favorite stuff was the Carolinas.
That's what I was going to say. What do you prefer, Georgia or Mid-Atlantic?
Yeah, no, Mid-Atlantic was where, that's where he became full-fledged Roddy Piper. He had a couple of years there with the best talent in the business. He and Flair were fucking great. But just that period of time, he had gotten old enough and had enough experience and had gotten all the size he was ever going to get. and was working with the best talent in the country. Like I said, the Flairs and the Snukas and the whole Carolinas crew. That TV was tremendous. And at that point, Crockett had bought the Nemo truck and switched from studios to the arenas for his syndicated TV, so it looked bigger. Everything was happening in the Carolinas in the early 80s, and that was an incredible run. And God, he had heat there. And remember, it may not have been the only reason, but it contributed that George Scott switched Piper babyface after he got stabbed that time in Raleigh. Because it's like, he's got so much fucking heat, but he's over and he can talk. Let's make use of this and go in a different direction. But the Carolinas, I mean, as far as wrestling, if you're just a wrestling fan of great wrestling and great wrestling TV and great wrestling matches, Piper's stuff in the Carolinas was better wrestling than the stuff in the WWF. It's just once he gets a hold of Hogan and Cyndi Lauper and all that stuff, that's what everybody remembers. But the actual wrestling, Piper and Valentine and the dog collar, the whole 9 yards, his Carolinas, that was it. That was the best.
How much of his WWF run did you see up until 87?
I say, the first couple of years I'm still trying to watch, especially the big shows as much as possible and anything involving, because I loved Piper. When Piper came to the Carolinas, I was one of the happiest campers in the world because that's when they had just opened up Cincinnati and I was going to get to see him. And I did several times live in Cincinnati, thanks to, Crockett running that territory. So, I was always a fan ever since the first time I saw him. And I would they got Channel 5, whereas the Sheik's TV was on Channel 5 at fucking Friday night Saturday morning at 1 a.m., right? And nobody was watching it. I'd stay up and watch that. But Channel 5 for Crockett's show, they gave them like Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. And I was trying desperately, even with my souped up antenna, Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for a VHF station in Cincinnati wasn't easy. But I would watch Piper through the snow and the hiss. That's how much of a fan I was of his. So no matter where he went, I tried to watch it. And I did obviously see the whole WrestleMania build and the war to settle the score and the stuff with Cyndi Lauper. And nobody could have carried that off at that time in the business, I don't think, except Piper. I think he was the perfect guy for that spot.
When it comes to guys in Mid-Atlantic at that time, specifically Flair and Piper, and the modern wrestling fan, the fan who's, let's say, 20 years old today, and they're looking at wrestling with modern wrestling eyes, do you think, because I don't know if they do, if they understand, because you see people like critique Flair's work now more than ever before. And I wonder if they realize how special these guys were in their time, and that you really have to look at it that way. Piper's promos were the most unique promos ever to a lot of people. Now they may not stand out as much, although in the scripted era of today they may. But do you think it's hard for some people to evaluate some of the, not big stars, but revolutionary stars of the past because of where we are today?
Yeah, the promo with Piper's promos, people have seen stuff like that since then, probably more in movies and TV shows than they've seen in wrestling. Because nobody was that good off the top of their head with no writers and no preparation time at being a fucking nut. But Piper was. And at the same time, he would come up with those little catchphrases and the little things that you'd remember without even really meaning to, probably. Just that's the way once he started, he was going somewhere. And he didn't always get there, but most time he did.
Roddy Piper was one of the wrestlers that wrestling fans copied the most on the playground.
Yeah, because he was amazing. And the thing is, you said people critiquing Flair's work with modern eyes or Piper's work with modern eyes. And it can go one of two ways. If you're looking for dives out of the ring and high spots over and over and all these weird moves or people going through tables or whatever it is they do every match, every TV show, every week now, then you're not going to think that they're, like you said a little while ago with Omega and or Austin Theory, great workers, because people now think that's what work is. But Piper and Flair, especially when they were working an angle with each other, because they were friends, so naturally they'd take more liberties with each other. Your friends can get stiffer with you than a guy you don't like. And Piper's style was so different that he looked like he was in a fight. And
to some fans, I've actually heard some people say he was too sloppy, but that defeats the whole purpose of what he was.
But besides that, he's throwing shit at you, and hopefully as much of it's going to land as possible, but sometimes it don't in a fight. But the animosity, the emotion, the passion that he showed when he got on somebody, it was like he was going to rip them limb from limb. And I saw him actually get on somebody in Cincinnati. I've told this story on the way to the ring, because Cincinnati was a rowdy crowd in 1981-82 when Crockett opened it up, because they hadn't drawn big houses in Cincinnati since the Sheik, folded up in the late 70s, but really since the early 70s when his business was hot. So there was a lot of pent-up demand. Georgia opened up Columbus, Dayton, places like that. They couldn't get in Cincinnati and make it go. Crockett finally did. Suddenly there's 8,000 or 10,000 people showing up at Cincinnati Gardens for wrestling in a town that has barely drawn 1,000 people the previous fucking 7-8 years. And those people were fucking hot and they were ready to go. Piper's going to the ring. This guy fucking comes out from the side. Boom, clocked him once, and Piper was all over that guy. Those quick punches he would throw in the wrestling match, same thing. Only it worked on this guy in a shooting fashion, because he went down and Piper was on top of him. And then all I could see was Piper's fist going up in the air and coming down behind the other people that were scurrying away. The cops ran in. They picked the guy up and they carried him out by his hands and feet, and he was twitching. And Piper only had a hold of him 15 seconds. But it was indistinguishable from the way he looked when he got on the guy in the wrestling match. Because he had that boiling over passion and animosity and aggression. And it looked like, especially with Piper, because he knew he wasn't the biggest guy, that he would shake his head and he would back up as a heel and he would play the chicken shit. But when he got on you, he was trying to rip you apart, because he knew that had to be his style of attack. So the point I'm making is the guys at that point, they were better workers because they imparted you the feeling that they were really ripping at each other rather than engaging in a choreographed performance of gymnastics. So those guys' work had nothing to do with trampoline flips.
And it's amazing how well Piper's work worked as a heel and as a babyface. Like when people hated him when he was doing it.
Anything.
Yeah, he didn't have to change anything.
It just the promos and who he was talking about. And he didn't change the style of promos. He just changed what he would get upset about and the people he was talking about. And that was the entire metamorphosis from heel to babyface, which is the perfect one. No difference whatsoever except your goals and your opponents.